Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sweet Life. I'm your host TJ Sweet, and on this podcast we are committed to helping you go from where you are to where you want to be. We're going to help you do that this week specifically because this is a powerful topic, but we're going to help you do that by reshaping your mindset, helping you live with intention and look at the world through a grateful lens. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in to these episodes every week. Again, I continue to see the numbers and the subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now so that you get notifications when these episodes come out. But I'm also paying attention. All of you, the numbers continue to grow, and I'm grateful for that. I'm inspired by that. It allows me to do even bigger things with this podcast on Spotify and iTunes, and it's even on YouTube. If you actually want to see how this looks as opposed to just how this sounds, go check us out on YouTube as well. And, this week is something that I hear a lot of people talk about, but I want to get uncomfortable being uncomfortable. I want this uncomfortable nature that we have is really just tension that something can change. And so I'm going to go back to correct what I just said of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And I had even an old golf coach that I had. His name was Brett. He was fantastic. But he told me all the time that he wants me to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it was just in simple golf swing. But I've learned that in my life, the only way to grow and to become who I wanted to become was I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But what is the one thing that makes us uncomfortable? It's not always, but it's often. And we use this word a lot, but it's fear. Fear of something, right? This idea of the choices we make, they're either rooted in, maybe it's a choice that we don't make, right? One way or the other, it's either rooted in pain or purpose. We make choices based on those two things. And so if something's going to hurt, or if we feel like we're going to lose something, it's rooted in fear, we're going to make a certain choice. But what if you looked more at purpose? So when a lot of times people say, well, don't be scared, which means nothing to the people that are actually scared. But it's a matter of how do we reshape the same scenario and actually look at it for what it actually is instead of the way we're perceiving it? Because oftentimes fear shows up as the way we used to see something, and now we're giving it the same projection now. But what if we then, in the moment of fear, started to look at it differently, started to look more at the purpose and the meaning behind it, right? So we're going to kind of talk more about overcoming fear. It doesn't mean I don't want you to feel it. I want you to have that sense of uncomfortableness, but I want you to be comfortable in those moments. I'm going to help you step beyond that comfort zone, because it's really easy to sit in your comfort zone and just stay there. But you know what's also uncomfortable is not moving, not making changes, staying the same. It's that idea of choose your discomfort. And 75 Hard is a great example of that. They always talk about choose your hard. It's hard to take the steps to go where you want to go, but it's also hard to stay where you are, knowing that that's not where you belong. So we'll stop and think about, how do you identify first and understand your fears? Because if somebody says they're fearless, it's not that they don't have the fears. It's just they just don't let them impact their choices in their life like it does other people. So what are some of the fears that you have that hold you back? And really stop and think about, where did that even start? And is it even real? Or is it something I'm thinking about from the past? But then also, how does it manifest in your life? And this could be in your career. This could be in your business. This could be in your personal life. It could be in your relationships. And I'll be transparent here. This is something I don't really talk about a lot, but here I am. I'm going to give it to you here quickly. I grew up in a very loving family and a great family. So please know that it's nothing about them, but it's really just as an adult now, I've recognized that I'm kind of looking back with this thought. But the fear of abandonment, to where my parents got divorced right when I went off to college, and I was alone. But I recognize now, looking back, I always had this attachment of something for some reason, to where I couldn't even spend the night at a friend's house. I was terrified. I got super nervous and got very uncertain and got almost sick to my stomach, and I couldn't do it. And I stopped to think, what is that? Right. And there's this abandonment thought, of which is really more about me processing things than it is about what anybody else does. But I also have to know, and I own, like, what is effective communication for me so that I don't have that fear that somebody's just going to pick up and go. Right. And in relationships, I know my love language, but I'm curious about the person's love language that I get to be with so that I can love her in a way. So where maybe she has something in relationships that she's afraid of that she needs to work through, but I have to own my own as well. And so for me, it's like this fear of abandonment. I needed to own that piece because I have a lot of great friends in my life, but I have a small circle of great friends in my life. And those people I know are going to be my friends for the rest of my life. Doesn't matter where we live, doesn't matter what we're doing in our lives, but I know that for sure. And I thrive in that. I find comfort in that. And I know that for sure. And so as you stop and think about how do certain things show up in your life, that fear of abandonment made me overthink, makes me overdo, makes me worry that I'm not doing enough, makes me try to be perfect, all these things because I'm trying to keep somebody instead of just loving somebody. That's how the fear of abandonment has showed up in my life, that I continuously work through, that I've owned, that I'm working through. And maybe it's fear of failure for you, but have you even defined what failure really even means? What is that fear? Or maybe as I talk to people and I coach people, even some of the most successful executives, they have a fear of failing. But I also challenge them and think, is it actually a fear of success? Because then they won't know what to do, or they'll have the when they get to become successful, they're fearful of that because they don't feel like they've deserved it. That's where a lot of people settle in. So as you can hear, fear manifests in a lot of different ways, but we have to own it first, stare it straight in the eye, and then decide to look at it differently. But how do you do that? Because I know a lot of people, like one of the most common things that people talk about is the most common fear is public speaking. Now, truthfully, if any of you know me, that's my sweet spot. That's where I love to be. I love to speak, not just in front of a camera, but in life. I love to be on stage, and my heart rate actually slows down when I get on stage because I'm doing what I love to do. But other people, it's the most terrifying moment of their life. So it's very interesting how the same moment can be perceived differently, but it's also how I think about the moment as opposed to how they do. But how do you move past some of these fears? So obviously the first thing we just talked about is how do you recognize them? And then how do you recognize your fears? And then how do they manifest in your life? That's step one, not acting like they're not there, because nobody has zero fear in their life. Second thing is, how do you get past them? And I'll tell you, full transparency, the answer isn't don't be scared. Don't be fearful. The answer is slow, gradual steps out of your comfort zone, starting with that, like small moments to build confidence. Because what really helps us get beyond our fear is our ability to learn and grow, but it's also our confidence to handle the situation. And so you have to understand, how do you build confidence in the thing that you're fearful of? And so for me, when we go back to my fear of abandonment, it really is this idea of who are the people I still have in my life? How do I slowly just let that mean more to me than the people that I don't get to have anymore? And the people that I don't get to have anymore were meant to be in my life they're in my life for a reason. They weren't in my life for the rest of my life, but they were there for a reason. And so start to really pay attention to the people that you have in your life more. And then what are the things that you can build more confidence to help you overcome that fear, while not getting discouraged when you do have that little fear that creeps back in. Again, the goal is not to be without fear. The goal is to be able to see the fear, feel the fear, and move past it. Because oftentimes, as we probably heard, fear is not an acronym, but people say it is. It's false expectations appearing real. So are you actually fearing the thing in front of you, or are you fearing something that has happened, but you're giving it too much power and projecting it forward now? Now, there are things in our life that we need to be fearful of for survival, right? That's natural and normal. But there's also a lot of things that we say that we fear, or that we're scared of, or I'm terrified of, or I'm mortified of, whatever word we want to use, that is actually just a self-limiting belief that we're giving way too much power to, because you've overcome a lot of your fears in your life, but you haven't given yourself the credit to build the confidence that you've been able to overcome those. Because as we overcome one fear, our brain starts to not be so threatened by them. And we start to then start taking steps towards, you know what, anytime I feel this feeling of fear, I'm going to get curious, I'm going to start taking action, and I'm going to overcome it. That's just how you overcome it. I had a chapter in my life too where I was claustrophobic in every environment. I couldn't even ride in a car for a little while. I had anxiety. I had all these things. I had this fear of being trapped, but I recognized that I wasn't. And I had to think differently about it. I had to come up with some coping mechanisms and breathing differently and all that. But now I don't have it anymore because I've overcome it and my brain's not threatened by it anymore. So there are some real fears that we have. So I'm not dismissing it, but if you want to overcome the fear, you can. You just have to start with the belief that you can and then start taking action and being disciplined enough to actually do it. And there are people that you'll recognize all over the place that have overcome certain fears. And, you know, we find so much courage and we find so much motivation by listening to those people who were able to overcome fear because we want to do that ourselves. Now, I don't know if you think about the fears that you have often or if you've just accepted them as what they are and they're never going to go away, which again is a choice that you're making too. But really, when you start to just face the fear head on and overcome it, there's so much growth and so much opportunity because fear is really just something to set down. Like just enough is enough with it. And start taking action and seeing life as it is and believing in yourself and having more confidence because of everything you've overcome already in your life. But once you decide to overcome a fear, go after it. Be willing to accept it whenever that feeling creeps back in, but you have to be willing to move past it and know that, you know what, you are in charge of your headspace. You are in charge of your mindset and your attitude and your willingness to do the work to overcome it, no matter what it is. So as we kind of work through this episode, I want you to, my real kind of like next step for you, after acknowledging the fear, slowly chipping away at it, and then really stop and think about how you've learned from other people overcoming their fear. Here's one thing I want you to do, and it's going to take a little courage to do this, but I want you to identify one fear that has limited you. Maybe it's something that's prevented you from an experience. I know some people that are scared to fly. There's nothing wrong with that. But think about if you've never flown and you can't go where you want to go and say, I want to go see Europe, but I'm scared to fly. Think about that. That's a very simple example, but you know, there's a lot of people who are fearful of certain things that have held them back. So I want you to stop and think about a fear that's limited you and break it down into small steps of why are you fearful and what can you do to overcome that fear if you really want to? And what is your life going to feel like once you overcome that fear? But I also want you to stop and think about what other fears have you had that you've overcome so that your brain starts to recognize what you're capable of. And then after you've recognized that one fear that you've kind of broken down into small steps, commit to one step this week and journal it, right? Talk about it with other people maybe. Send a text to somebody that you're overcoming it. And then you'll start to recognize how you have different feelings about the same thing before and after you started to acknowledge that maybe your fear wasn't actually real. Your fear was a perspective that you used to have, but you're ready to have a new one. So I hope this episode resonates with you. I hope you start to overcome some of your fear. Maybe your fear is to write a book and you're afraid of what people are going to say. Maybe your fear is to publish a podcast. Because I was that person. I was afraid to publish a book. I was afraid nobody would listen to the podcast. And here we are, 150 plus episodes later, multiple books later. There is hope on the other side of the fear. Take your fears. Don't let your fears take you. Challenge yourself because you are worth it and you have the ability to overcome anything if you really want to. I hope you share this episode with somebody because I guarantee you this is something more common than we give it credit for. And I hope that you always remember that you have the power and the choice to reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. Until the next episode, never stop.